Andrew Carnegie, the power of silence that makes you untouchable. Most people lose their power every single day, and they don't even realize it. Not because they are weak, not because they lack intelligence, but because they react. They react to words, to opinions, to disrespect, to noise. They hand over their emotional state to anyone willing to provoke them. And in that moment, they become powerless. Andrew Carnegie understood something that almost no one today truly understands. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. Silence is the most dangerous weapon you possess, and most people throw it away without a second thought. Before we go any further, if you're someone who wants emotional discipline, if you're tired of feeling drained, provoked, or pulled into pointless battles, subscribe now. This channel is for people who choose mastery over reaction. This is not motivation. This is reconstruction. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the quiet ones always end up winning. We live in a world designed to steal your attention. Notifications, opinions, criticism, comparison. Everyone wants access to your emotions. Social media has turned emotional reaction into currency. The angrier you get, the more you engage. The more you engage, the more you're controlled. And the moment someone can disturb your peace, they control you. Not your schedule, not your bank account, but something far more valuable, your state of mind, your energy, your focus, the very fuel that determines whether you rise or stagnate. Let me tell you something about Andrew Carnegie that most people don't know. When he was 13 years old, working in a Pittsburgh cotton mill for $1.20 a week, he witnessed something that changed his life forever. A fellow worker, a man twice his age, got into an argument with a supervisor. The argument escalated. Voices raised. Threats were made. And within minutes, the man was fired, escorted out, replaced before the end of the day. Young Carnegie watched this and realized something profound. The man who lost his temper lost everything else with it. His income, his dignity, his future. All gone because he couldn't control himself for 60 seconds. Carnegie decided that day that he would never be that man. He would never hand his power to anyone through reaction, and he kept that promise for the rest of his life. Carnegie observed early in life that the most reactive people are the easiest to manipulate. If someone can make you angry, they own your behavior. If someone can provoke you, they dictate your state of mind. And Carnegie realized something that changed his entire trajectory. True power does not come from dominance. It comes from self-command. Most people never learn this. They spend their entire lives enslaved to their reactions. Someone criticizes them, they defend. Someone disrespects them, they retaliate. Someone challenges them, they explode. And with every reaction, they lose a piece of themselves. Here's what no one tells you. Every time you react emotionally to something insignificant, you're training yourself to be weak. You're conditioning your nervous system to be fragile. You're teaching your mind that external circumstances control your internal state. And once that pattern is set, you become a puppet. Anyone can pull your strings. Carnegie refused to be a puppet, and that refusal made him untouchable. Let me explain the neuroscience behind this, because understanding why you react will help you stop reacting. Inside your brain, there are two systems constantly competing for control. The first is your amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep in your brain. This is your emotional center, your fight-or-flight response, your primal survival mechanism. When someone insults you, criticizes you, or threatens you, your amygdala fires. It floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate spikes, your muscles tense, your vision narrows. And in that state, you're not thinking. You're reacting. The second system is your prefrontal cortex. This is located right behind your forehead. This is your rational brain, your strategic mind, your ability to pause, assess, and choose your response. But here's the problem. The amygdala is faster. It evolved millions of years ago to keep you alive when a predator attacked. The prefrontal cortex is newer, it's slower. And when the amygdala takes over, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. This is why people say things in anger they don't mean. Why they make decisions they regret. Why they burn bridges they needed. Because in that moment, they're not operating from their highest intelligence. They're operating from their most primitive survival instinct. Carnegie understood this intuitively, long before neuroscience could explain it. He developed a practice that saved him countless times. When someone tried to provoke him, he would count. Slowly, silently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and by the time he reached 10, the surge had passed. His prefrontal cortex came back online, and from that place, he could respond with precision instead of emotion. You can do the same. Right now, commit to this. The next time someone provokes you, before you speak, count to 10. Breathe deeply, feel the anger, acknowledge it, but don't act on it. And notice what happens. The anger doesn't own you anymore. You own it. Now let me tell you how Carnegie rose from that cotton mill to become one of the wealthiest men in human history. Not because he spoke louder, not because he argued more, not because he explained himself. He mastered non-reaction. He understood that silence is a form of psychological warfare, and most people have no defense against it. In 1865, Carnegie was still relatively unknown. He was investing in railroads, building connections, learning the steel business. But he wasn't wealthy yet. He wasn't powerful yet. He was just another ambitious young man trying to make something of himself. One day, he attended a business meeting with several established industrialists. These were men who had built fortunes, men who were used to dominating rooms, men who spoke with authority and expected deference. One of them, a man named Thomas Scott, made a comment dismissing one of Carnegie's ideas. The room went silent. Everyone expected Carnegie to defend himself, to argue, to prove his point. But he didn't. He simply nodded, smiled slightly, and said nothing. The meeting continued, and later, after everyone had left, Scott approached Carnegie privately. He said, "You didn't fight me in there. Why?" Carnegie replied, "Because you weren't wrong. And even if you were, arguing wouldn't have changed your mind. Only results will." Scott never forgot that response. And years later, when Scott had the power to elevate someone, he chose Carnegie, not because Carnegie was the smartest, not because he was the most aggressive, but because he had demonstrated something rare: self-control. The ability to absorb criticism without collapsing. The ability to remain calm when ego demanded reaction. That restraint opened doors that aggression never could. Carnegie believed that the man who remains calm under pressure automatically rises above those who don't. Not morally, not spiritually, but practically. Silence unsettles insecure people. It forces them to project, to over-explain, to reveal their intentions. When you react emotionally, you expose yourself. You show your wounds. You telegraph your weaknesses. You give your opponent a map to your vulnerabilities. But when you remain silent, you observe. You see what others miss. You notice the patterns, the contradictions, the desperation beneath the bravado. And observation creates leverage. Let me give you a real example that demonstrates this perfectly. In 1892, Carnegie faced one of the most hostile labor strikes in American history: the Homestead Strike. His steel plant was shut down. Workers were furious. The press was tearing him apart. His reputation was being destroyed in newspapers across the country. Competitors were circling, hoping the conflict would ruin him. Everyone expected Carnegie to fight back publicly, to issue statements, to defend his position, to engage in the battle of public opinion. But he didn't. Instead, he left. He went to Scotland. He became unreachable. While chaos erupted in Pennsylvania, Carnegie was thousands of miles away, silent and unmoved. His managers handled the crisis. His lawyers dealt with the legalities. But Carnegie himself said nothing. And that silence drove people insane. Journalists didn't know what to write when there was no response. Critics didn't know how to attack someone who wouldn't engage. Workers didn't know how to negotiate with someone who wasn't present. The silence created a vacuum. And in that vacuum, everyone revealed their true position, their desperation, their bluffs, their bottom lines. When Carnegie finally returned months later, the strike was over. The plant reopened, and he was still standing, stronger than before, not because he won the argument, but because he refused to have one. Was it ruthless? Yes. Was it cold? Perhaps, but it was effective. And Carnegie understood something that most people refuse to accept. Not every battle deserves your participation. Not every fight is worth fighting. And sometimes the most powerful move is to simply remove yourself from the equation entirely. If this message feels like it's hitting at the right time, subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you next will change how you see conflict forever. The people who find this channel aren't here by accident. They're here because they're ready to stop being controlled by their reactions. And if that's you, you're in the right place. Here's a truth most people never realize. Nothing frustrates insecure individuals more than someone they cannot provoke. When you don't react, they feel ignored. They feel powerless. They feel exposed. And that discomfort reveals everything about them. Think about the last argument you witnessed or participated in. Who lost control first? Whoever raised their voice? Whoever started repeating themselves? Whoever resorted to insults or personal attacks? That person lost, not because they were wrong about the facts, but because they demonstrated that they could be shaken. And once someone knows you can be shaken, they'll shake you every single time they need to feel powerful. Silence removes their control. It creates a vacuum, and human beings cannot tolerate a vacuum. We're psychologically wired to fill silence with sound, with explanation, with justification. This is why interrogators use silence as a weapon. They ask a question, then wait. And most people, unable to bear the discomfort, will fill that silence with information they never intended to reveal. Carnegie used this ruthlessly in business negotiations. He would sit across from men who wanted to intimidate him, men who raised their voices, men who made threats, men who pounded tables and made ultimatums. And Carnegie would do nothing. He wouldn't interrupt. He wouldn't defend. He wouldn't flinch. He would simply sit there, calm and silent, waiting. And every single time, those men would eventually exhaust themselves. They'd run out of steam. Their anger would burn through its fuel. And in that exhaustion, stripped of their bluster and bravado, they would reveal their true position, their actual needs, their real constraints. And once Carnegie had that information, the negotiation was over. He had already won. The person who speaks less forces the other to reveal more. And that imbalance is power. Not loud power, not aggressive power, but the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself, the kind of power that simply is. Let me tell you about another man who understood this principle deeply, Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, Stoic philosopher. One of the most powerful men in human history. He wrote in his private journal, his meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire. He commanded armies. He had the authority to execute anyone who disrespected him, but he didn't need to, because he understood that true power is internal, not external. When senators criticized him, he listened in silence. When advisors questioned his decisions, he considered their words without anger. When enemies mocked him, he remained unmoved, not because he didn't care, but because he had mastered the one thing most people never master: himself. There's a story about Aurelius that perfectly illustrates this. A senator, drunk on wine and arrogance, publicly insulted him during a state dinner, called him weak, questioned his leadership, mocked his philosophical interests. The room went silent. Everyone expected the emperor to respond with fury, to have the man arrested, to make an example of him. But Marcus Aurelius did nothing. He simply looked at the senator, smiled slightly, and returned to his meal. The senator, robbed of his dramatic moment, left the dinner in shame. And the next day, Aurelius sent him a private message, not a threat, not a rebuke, just a simple note that said, "I hope your head feels better today than your judgment did last night." That response did more damage than any punishment could have because it demonstrated complete control, complete immunity to provocation. And everyone who witnessed it understood they were in the presence of someone truly powerful. You can develop this same immunity. But it requires practice. It requires intentionality. And it requires understanding that silence is not passive. It's active. It's a choice. It's a demonstration of strength. Here's where most people misunderstand this entire concept. They think silence means you don't care. That detachment equals apathy. That non-reaction is the same as weakness or passivity, and that's dangerously wrong. This is not about suppressing emotion. This is not about pretending you don't feel. This is not about becoming an emotionless robot. You still feel anger. You still feel pain. You still feel disappointment, frustration, betrayal. But you don't allow those emotions to dictate your behavior. There's a massive difference between feeling something and being controlled by it. Think of it this way. Emotions are data. They're information. They're signals from your nervous system telling you that something requires attention. Anger tells you a boundary was crossed. Fear tells you there's a perceived threat. Sadness tells you something matters to you. These are valuable signals. The problem isn't feeling them. The problem is reacting to them before you've processed what they're telling you. Carnegie trained himself to pause. Not forever, not indefinitely, just long enough to create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, clarity appears. Options become visible, strategy emerges. You move from reactive to responsive, from controlled to in control. Let me give you a practical technique that you can use immediately. It's called the 4-7-8 breath. When you feel provoked, when that surge of emotion hits, breathe in slowly through your nose for 4 counts. Hold that breath for 7 counts. Then exhale slowly through your mouth for 8 counts. Repeat this 3 times. What this does physiologically is activate your parasympathetic nervous system. This is your rest and digest mode. It counteracts the fight or flight response. It brings your heart rate down. It lowers your cortisol. It brings your prefrontal cortex back online. And suddenly, you can think clearly again. You're no longer hijacked by emotion. You're back in the driver's seat. Carnegie didn't know the neuroscience behind this, but he practiced something similar. He would breathe, count, pause, create space. And that discipline, repeated thousands of times over decades, became his greatest competitive advantage. Now let me address something that people struggle with. The fear that silence will be interpreted as weakness. That if you don't defend yourself, people will think you're a pushover. That if you don't react, you're letting people disrespect you. Here's the truth. Weak people are loud. Insecure people need to prove themselves constantly. People with nothing to lose make the most noise. But powerful people, truly powerful people, move differently. They don't need to announce their strength. They don't need to defend their position. They don't need validation from anyone. Let me tell you about Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States, led the country through its bloodiest war. Faced criticism unlike almost any leader in history. Half the country hated him. Newspapers called him a tyrant, an ape, an incompetent fool. His own cabinet members worked against him. And yet, Lincoln rarely responded to criticism publicly. But he had a secret practice. He would write what he called hot letters. When someone attacked him, when rage and frustration built up, he would sit down and write a letter. A brutal, honest, unfiltered letter saying exactly what he thought. He would pour all of his anger onto the page, and then he would put the letter in his desk drawer and never send it. Years after his death, historians found dozens of these letters. Letters to generals who had failed him, letters to politicians who had betrayed him, letters to journalists who had slandered him. Fully written, fully addressed, never sent. Why? Because Lincoln understood that the act of writing released the emotion. It gave him a way to process what he was feeling without damaging relationships or making situations worse. He got the satisfaction of expressing himself without the consequences of acting on it. And that discipline, that ability to feel fully but act strategically, made him one of the most effective leaders in history. You can do the same. When someone provokes you, when you feel the urge to send that angry text, that cutting email, that defensive response, write it. Write everything you want to say. Don't hold back. But don't send it. Save it as a draft. Come back to it in 24 hours. And in almost every case, you'll realize you don't want to send it anymore. The emotion has passed. The clarity has arrived, and you just saved yourself from damaging something that mattered. Pause for a moment. I want you to think about the last time you reacted emotionally and later regretted it. Maybe you sent a message you wish you could take back. Maybe you said something in anger that damaged a relationship. Maybe you made a decision based on emotion that cost you money, time, respect, or opportunity. Think about that moment. Feel it. And now commit to something different. Type silence in the comments if you're choosing control over reaction from now on, because declaring it publicly makes it real. It makes it a commitment, not just a wish. Now let's talk about something Carnegie understood deeply, but rarely spoke about publicly. The power of moving in silence. Announcing your plans invites resistance. Explaining yourself invites judgment. Defending your vision invites doubt. Power moves quietly. The strongest individuals don't over-explain. They don't seek validation before they act. They don't announce their next move. They build in silence. They improve in silence. They rise in silence. And when results appear, no explanation is needed. This is why success often looks sudden to others, but never is to the person who achieved it. Carnegie didn't tell people he was going to dominate the steel industry. He didn't announce his intention to become one of the wealthiest men in the world. He didn't broadcast his plans. He worked quietly while others talked. He built systematically while others debated. He accumulated power while others argued about who deserved it. And when people finally noticed it was already done, the empire was already built, the wealth was already accumulated, the influence was already established. There's a profound reason for this. When you announce your plans prematurely, you trigger resistance. Not always intentionally, but people will project their limitations onto your vision. They'll tell you why it won't work, why it's too risky, why you're not ready, why someone else already tried and failed. And if you're not careful, their doubt becomes your doubt, their fear becomes your hesitation, their limitation becomes your ceiling. Silence protects your vision. It keeps your energy focused on execution instead of explanation. It prevents you from wasting time defending what doesn't need defense yet. Because here's the brutal truth. People don't argue with results. They argue with potential. They debate possibilities. They question intentions. But when you show them the finished product, the conversation is over. Think about Steve Jobs. When he was developing the iPhone, he didn't announce it to the world. He didn't explain his vision in interviews. He didn't leak details to generate hype. He built it in absolute secrecy. Even his own employees didn't know what they were building unless they absolutely needed to. And when he finally revealed it in 2007, the world changed overnight. If he had announced the iPhone concept years earlier, what would have happened? Competitors would have copied it. Investors would have questioned it. Critics would have mocked it. Nokia, BlackBerry, Microsoft, they all would have started working on their versions immediately. But because Jobs moved in silence, he had a years-long head start. And by the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late. You have the same opportunity, not with world-changing technology necessarily, but with your own goals, your own projects, your own transformation. Pick one thing you genuinely want to achieve in the next 6 months, something meaningful, something that would change your life, and don't tell anyone. Not your friends who might doubt you, not your family who might worry about you, not social media where you might perform for validation. Just work on it in complete silence. And watch what happens. You'll find reserves of focus you didn't know you had. You'll find clarity you couldn't access when you were performing for others. You'll find motivation that doesn't depend on external applause. And when you finally reveal the result, it will speak louder than any announcement ever could. Let me tell you about the economics of attention in the modern world, because this is where most people are getting destroyed without even realizing it. Social media platforms are not free services. You are not the customer. You are the product. Your attention is being sold to advertisers. And these platforms have hired the best psychologists, the best neuroscientists, the best behavioral engineers to design systems that keep you engaged. How do they do this? By provoking emotion, particularly anger. Anger is the most engaging emotion. It drives clicks. It drives comments. It drives shares. When you see something that makes you angry, your brain releases dopamine. You feel compelled to respond, to correct, to argue, to prove someone wrong. And the moment you do, the algorithm rewards you. It shows your comment to more people, which generates more responses, which generates more anger, which generates more engagement. This is called rage bait, and it's everywhere. Political posts designed to divide, controversial opinions designed to provoke, outrage culture designed to keep you emotionally activated, and every time you engage, you're being farmed. Your emotional energy is being harvested and converted into advertising revenue. Carnegie didn't have to deal with Twitter mobs or Instagram trolls or Facebook arguments, but the principle remains exactly the same. Don't feed the machine. Don't give your power to systems designed to drain it. The strongest move you can make online is to observe without engaging, to witness without reacting, to scroll past provocation as if it doesn't exist. Here's a challenge that will transform your life if you actually do it. For the next 7 days, do not argue online. Not once. Someone says something you disagree with, scroll past. Someone attacks your opinion, don't defend it. Someone posts obvious rage bait designed to provoke, ignore it completely. And at the end of those 7 days, evaluate your mental state. Notice how much energy you suddenly have. Notice how much clearer your thinking becomes. Notice how much more time you have for things that actually matter. This is not avoidance. This is not weakness. This is discernment. This is understanding that not every battle is worth fighting, that not every comment deserves a response, that not every provocation requires engagement. Carnegie built an empire while others argued. You can build your life while others scroll. Now let's talk about silence in relationships, because this is where most people struggle. We've been taught that communication is always the answer, that you should always express how you feel, that silence in a relationship is toxic. And while open communication is important, there's a massive difference between productive dialogue and emotional dumping. Carnegie applied silence strategically in his personal relationships too, not as punishment, not as manipulation, but as a tool for clarity and de-escalation. When his wife Louise was upset, he didn't immediately try to fix it. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain his position. He listened. He waited. He gave space for the emotion to settle. Most arguments in relationships aren't actually about the issue being discussed. They're about emotional overflow. Someone is stressed, tired, overwhelmed, and they snap. The topic is irrelevant. It could be the dishes, the schedule, a comment that was made, money, plans, anything. The topic is just the trigger. It's not the real issue. And if you engage with the trigger, if you argue about the surface problem, you miss the deeper need. Silence allows you to see beneath the surface. It allows your partner to exhaust the emotional storm and get to the real concern underneath. And once the real concern is visible, once the actual need is expressed, you can address it properly. But if you react to the storm, if you fight fire with fire, you just create more weather, more chaos, more damage. Here's a practical technique for relationships. When conflict arises, before you speak, ask yourself one question. Am I about to respond, or am I about to react? A response is thoughtful. It considers the other person. It seeks resolution. It builds connection. A reaction is impulsive. It defends yourself. It seeks to win. It damages connection. And here's the truth that most people learn too late. In relationships, winning an argument means losing the relationship. Every time you prove you're right at the expense of your partner's dignity, you win the battle but lose the war. Carnegie's marriage to Louise lasted decades, not because it was perfect. Not because they never disagreed, but because he understood that some battles aren't worth fighting, that some comments don't need addressing, that some silences are more loving than words. Let me give you a specific example. There was a period in Carnegie's life when he was traveling constantly for business, months away from home. Louise was frustrated. She felt abandoned. She felt like the business mattered more than she did. And one day, when Carnegie returned from a particularly long trip, she confronted him. She listed everything she was feeling: the loneliness, the resentment, the anger. Carnegie's instinct, like most men, was to defend himself, to explain why the travel was necessary, to justify his choices, to argue that he was building a future for both of them. But he didn't. He sat down. He looked at her. And he said, "You're right, and I'm sorry." That's it. No justification, no defense, just acknowledgement. Louise later said that moment changed their marriage. Not because the travel stopped, it didn't, but because she felt heard. She felt valued. She felt like her emotions mattered more than his ego, and that created space for them to actually solve the problem together instead of fighting about it. That's the power of strategic silence in relationships. It's not about being passive. It's not about accepting disrespect. It's about creating space for real connection instead of defensive posturing. Now let's talk about silence in your career. In business. In professional environments where dominance and assertiveness are often confused with competence, how does silence give you an advantage there? Carnegie's entire fortune was built on this principle. He rarely spoke in meetings unless he had something definitive to say. He would let others pitch their ideas. He would let others argue their positions. He would let others reveal their thinking, their strategies, their concerns. And then, only after everyone had exhausted themselves, after all the information was on the table, he would speak. And because he spoke so rarely when he did, people listened with complete attention. This is a lost art in modern business culture. Most people think they need to dominate every conversation to prove their value. They think they need to be the loudest voice in the room to be respected. They think silence will make them invisible. But the opposite is true. The person who speaks the least but says the most carries the most weight. The person who listens more than they talk gathers more intelligence. The person who observes before acting makes better decisions. In negotiations, silence is devastatingly effective. Here's a technique Carnegie used that you can apply immediately. After you make an offer, shut up. Don't justify it. Don't explain it. Don't fill the silence with nervous talk. Just make your offer clearly, then stop talking and wait. And whoever speaks first after that loses. Why? Because in that silence, pressure builds exponentially. The other party's mind starts racing. Are they considering it? Are they offended? Should I lower my price? Should I sweeten the deal? Should I explain more? And often they'll start negotiating against themselves. They'll start offering concessions you never asked for. They'll start revealing their true position and their actual constraints. Carnegie once sat in a negotiation for over 3 minutes without saying a word after making his offer. 3 minutes of complete, unbroken silence. The other party couldn't handle it. They started talking. They started justifying. They started lowering their demands. And Carnegie didn't say a single word. He just waited. And he won. You can do the same. In salary negotiations, in business deals, in any situation where terms are being discussed, make your position clear and strong. Then go silent. Let the discomfort work in your favor. Let the other person fill the void, and watch how often they negotiate against themselves just to escape the tension. Here's another layer most people miss. Silence also protects you from saying something you'll regret. How many deals have been lost because someone talked too much? How many jobs? How many relationships? How many opportunities vanished because someone couldn't stop explaining, justifying, oversharing? Carnegie had a personal rule that saved him countless times. Never make a major decision in the moment. Never commit to anything significant without sleeping on it. Always give yourself 24 hours of silence before saying yes or no to something important. And that simple rule, that tiny pause, saved him from mistakes that would have cost millions. Because emotions cloud judgment, pressure distorts clarity, excitement creates blindness, but silence, space, time, these restore perspective. They allow you to see what you couldn't see when you were caught up in the moment. Let's go even deeper into something most people never consider: silence as a form of self-respect. Every time you refuse to argue with someone beneath your standards, you honor yourself. Every time you refuse to explain yourself to people who won't understand anyway, you protect your energy. Every time you walk away from chaos instead of engaging with it, you demonstrate that your peace is more valuable than their opinion. This is not arrogance. This is not superiority. This is boundary setting. This is understanding that not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone earns the right to your attention, your time, your energy, your explanation. And the moment you truly internalize that, you stop wasting your life on people and situations that drain you. Carnegie was extremely selective about who he spent time with. He didn't attend every social event he was invited to. He didn't accept every business proposal. He didn't engage with every critic or competitor. He built a small, tight circle of trusted advisors, mentors, and partners, and he ignored almost everyone else. And that ruthless focus, that protection of his attention and energy, allowed him to accomplish in one lifetime what most people couldn't accomplish in 3. You have the same choice available to you right now. You can spend your life trying to please everyone, or you can build something meaningful. You can engage with every distraction, or you can protect your focus like it's the most valuable resource you have, because it is. You can react to every provocation, or you can move in silence toward your goals with laser precision. But you cannot do both. The choice is binary, and it's yours to make. Here's the final truth, and this is what everything has been building toward. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to react to everything. You don't need approval to be powerful. You don't need validation to move forward. You don't need permission to protect your peace. Andrew Carnegie's greatest lesson wasn't about money. It wasn't about business strategy. It wasn't about steel or industry or accumulating wealth. His greatest lesson was about self-command, about mastering the one thing most people never control in their entire lives, themselves. And once you master that, once you develop the unshakable ability to remain calm when everyone around you is losing their minds, once you can sit in complete silence while chaos screams for your attention and doesn't get it, you become untouchable, not invincible, not perfect, but untouchable. No insult can shake you because you're not looking for validation from people who don't matter. No chaos can control you because you've learned to create your own internal stability that doesn't depend on external circumstances. No noise can distract you because you've trained yourself to filter ruthlessly and focus absolutely. Silence isn't emptiness. It's not weakness. It's not passivity or surrender. Silence is strength concentrated. It's power contained. It's the refusal to be pulled into battles that don't serve your mission. It's the discipline to observe instead of react. It's the wisdom to know that most things don't require your response, your defense, your explanation, your participation. Carnegie lived this principle every single day. He proved it works across decades. He built an empire on it. And then, in what might be his most powerful move of all, he gave most of that empire away. He spent the second half of his life in philanthropy, building libraries, funding education, creating institutions that would outlive him by centuries. Why? Because he understood something even deeper than self-command. He understood that legacy isn't about what you accumulate. It's about what you leave behind. It's about the example you set. And the greatest example you can set is showing what's possible when you refuse to be controlled by anything outside yourself. So here's my final challenge to you, and I want you to take this seriously. For the next 30 days, practice strategic silence. When someone tries to provoke you, count to 10 and don't react. When someone criticizes you unfairly, don't defend yourself. When someone tries to pull you into their drama, their chaos, their pointless battle, walk away without explanation. And at the end of those 30 days, sit down and evaluate your life honestly. Look at your stress levels. Look at your productivity. Look at your mental clarity. Look at your relationships. Look at your energy. Look at what you've actually accomplished instead of what you've argued about, and you'll see exactly what Carnegie saw over a century ago. That silence isn't weakness. That non-reaction isn't passivity. That strategic withdrawal isn't surrender. You'll see that silence is the ultimate form of power available to human beings, because everything external can be taken from you. Your money, your status, your reputation, your possessions, everything. But no one can take your ability to remain calm. No one can take your capacity to choose your response. No one can take your power to simply not react. That is yours. Always. Under every circumstance. In every situation. And once you claim it, once you own it completely, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Not dangerous to others, dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to limitation, dangerous to every force that tries to keep you reactive, distracted, and small. If this message resonated with you, if you felt something shift while watching this, share it. Not for me, not for the algorithm, but for someone in your life who's drowning in reaction, someone who's exhausted from constant battles that don't matter, someone who needs permission to stop engaging with everything and everyone, someone who needs to hear that silence is an option, that they don't have to fight every fight, that peace is not only possible but powerful. Subscribe to this channel if you want more of this level of content, because we don't do surface-level motivation here. We don't do empty platitudes or feel-good nonsense. This is deep work. This is the kind of ancient wisdom combined with modern psychology that actually changes lives when you apply it. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, you're exactly the kind of person who will apply it. You wouldn't still be here if you weren't ready. Most people clicked away in the first 2 minutes, but you stayed. That tells me something about you. You're not looking for easy answers. You're not looking for shortcuts. You're looking for mastery. And mastery requires exactly what we've been talking about: discipline, focus, self-command, and silence. Remember this as you go back into the world. The world will try to provoke you every single day. It will test you constantly. It will challenge your peace. It will try to pull you into chaos, drama, reaction, and noise. And most people will fail that test every single time. They'll react, they'll defend, they'll engage, they'll give away their power without even realizing it. And they'll stay exactly where they are. But you're not most people anymore. You're someone who understands that silence is power, that stillness is strength, that the ability to remain unmoved, unshaken, and uncontrolled is the ultimate competitive advantage in a world full of reactive, emotional, chaotic people. Andrew Carnegie proved it. Marcus Aurelius proved it. Lincoln proved it. History has validated it across centuries and cultures, and now it's your turn to live it. Move in silence. Build in silence. Rise in silence. Improve in silence. Transform in silence. And when the world finally notices, when people finally ask how you did it, how you changed, how you grew so much, let your results be the only explanation you ever need to give. Because power doesn't explain itself. It doesn't justify itself. It doesn't defend itself. It simply is.